I was still holding the appointment card for our fertility workup when Ethan slid a manila envelope across the kitchen table. His mother sat beside him, stirring cream into coffee she hadn't been invited to drink. "Your wife is barren," Margaret said. "Stop wasting your life waiting for a miracle." For a second, I honestly thought I had walked into the wrong house. It was my kitchen. My blue ceramic mug sat beside the sink. My raincoat hung from the hook near the back door. The digital clock on the stove read 7:14 a.m., and a local meteorologist on WKYT was warning about freezing rain along New Circle Road. Everything looked ordinary except my husband's face. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. "What's in the envelope?" I asked. He pushed it another inch toward me. "Rebecca, please sit down." "I am sitting down." Margaret made a small sound in her throat, the kind she used when she believed someone was being difficult on purpose. Ethan finally looked at me. He was 45, silver just beginning to show near his temples, still wearing the navy scrubs he'd slept in after an overnight call. To anyone else, he looked steady, competent, the kind of doctor you'd trust when things went wrong. I knew better. "I filed for divorce," he said. The refrigerator hummed behind me. That was the first sound I noticed, not my breathing, not the rain tapping the window, just the old refrigerator kicking on as if the morning had not split open. I looked down at the appointment card in my hand. Dr. Lisa Chen, Reproductive Endocrinology, Tuesday 9:30 a.m. Our appointment. At least I had thought it was ours. "You filed before the testing?" I asked. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. "We've been doing this for years." "No, I've been doing this for years. I've had blood drawn, ultrasounds, hormone injections, procedures. You haven't even given one sample." Margaret leaned forward. "My son has delivered more babies than most people will ever see. He knows his body." I turned to her. "That isn't how fertility testing works?" "Well, something isn't working." Ethan closed his eyes. "Mom." But he didn't tell her to stop. That was Ethan's favorite kind of protest, soft enough that Margaret never had to obey it. We had been married 12 years. In the beginning, we were happy in the quiet, ordinary way that doesn't make interesting stories. Saturday breakfasts at Doodle's downtown, UK basketball on television with Ethan yelling at the referees like they could hear him. Summer drives past the horse farms on Old Frankfurt Pike, windows down, no destination in mind. We had talked about children before the wedding, 2, maybe 3. Ethan wanted a boy named after his father. I wanted a little girl with my grandmother's stubborn chin. For 6 years, we assumed we had time. Then came the first pregnancy. I bought a tiny pair of white socks at Target and hid them in Ethan's dresser drawer. He found them after work and laughed so hard he cried. At 9 weeks, there was no heartbeat. The second loss happened 18 months later. The third was at 11 weeks. After that one, Ethan stopped touching the framed ultrasound picture on the bookshelf. He started sleeping with his back to me. He spent longer hours at the hospital and called it responsibility. Margaret called it reality. A year earlier, one of my tests had shown diminished ovarian reserve. Dr. Chen explained that my egg supply was lower than expected for my age. It could make pregnancy more difficult. It did not mean impossible. Margaret had been in the waiting room that day because she insisted on driving us home. By the time we reached her townhouse in Chevy Chase, diminished ovarian reserve had become, her ovaries are failing. 3 months later, it became, Rebecca can't have children. That morning, she finally used the word she had been circling for a year. Barren. I placed the appointment card on top of the envelope. "Did you speak to Dr. Chen?" Ethan stared at the table. "Mom spoke with someone." I looked at Margaret. "Who?" "A person familiar with your situation." That isn't an answer. She confirmed what we already knew. No one at that clinic would discuss my medical information with you. Margaret's expression barely changed. "You always were defensive about facts." I almost laughed. It came out as one short breath. Ethan reached for my hand, and I pulled it away. "I'm 45, he said. "I still want a family." The sentence landed harder than the papers. Not because I didn't understand what he meant. Because after 12 years, 3 pregnancies, and 3 hospital bracelets, he had decided I did not count as family. "You already had one," I said. His mouth tightened. Margaret looked toward the window as if I had embarrassed everyone. Ethan told me he had met with a lawyer 3 weeks earlier. The house would remain his for the moment because it was closer to the hospital. He had transferred his paycheck into a separate account. My salary still went into my own checking account, but several automatic payments had already been changed. Internet, utilities, home insurance. He had prepared. That was the part that stayed with me. He had gone to work, eaten dinner across from me, asked whether we needed milk, and prepared to remove me from his life one automatic payment at a time. I did not sign anything. Instead, I folded the appointment card into my purse and called a family law attorney named Naomi Price from the parking lot of a Panera on Richmond Road. Naomi told me not to agree to a single thing while I was in shock. "Take pictures of every page," she said. "Save every message. And Rebecca, change the passwords on your personal accounts today." By Friday, I was living in a furnished apartment off Nicholasville Road. It had beige walls, thin carpet, and a second-floor balcony overlooking a row of parked cars. The first night, I ate microwave soup from a paper bowl because I couldn't find the box with my dishes. At work the next morning, I helped Walter Grady practice standing from a chair. Walter was 76, a retired history teacher recovering from a stroke. His left leg dragged when he was tired, and he hated the safety belt we used around his waist. "On 3, I told him. Lean forward, nose over toes." He pushed up, wobbled, and dropped back into the chair. "Damn thing moved," he muttered. The chair did not move. "Then the building shifted." Despite myself, I smiled. He studied my face. "You look worse than I walk." "Thank you, Walter." "I meant emotionally." I adjusted his cane. "Let's try again." He gripped the armrests, then stopped. "That's the trouble with losing your balance," he said. "Everybody tells you to stand up before they ask what knocked you down." I looked away before he could see my eyes fill. 4 days later, I kept the appointment with Dr. Chen. Alone. She reviewed my blood work, explained again that low ovarian reserve did not equal sterility, and asked when I'd last had a period. I gave her the date. She paused. "Let's run one more test." I assumed it was routine. That afternoon, I was sitting on the edge of my borrowed bed, opening a carton of Greek yogurt, when my phone rang. Dr. Chen's name appeared on the screen. "Rebecca," she said, "I need you to sit down." "I am sitting." She took a breath. "Your pregnancy test is positive. Based on your dates, you're close to 4 weeks." The yogurt slipped from my hand and landed upside down on the carpet. I didn't move to pick it up. The baby had been conceived before Ethan filed. Before Margaret sat in my kitchen and reduced my entire body to one cruel word. Before my husband decided he needed to leave me to have a family. Ethan's name was still in my recent calls. I pressed it. My thumb hovered over the green button. Then I remembered his silence while his mother told me what I was worth. I locked the screen. For that one night, I kept the truth to myself. The first emotion I felt wasn't happiness. It was fear. Dr. Lisa Chen asked me to return to her office the following morning, and I barely slept the night before. I kept waking up every hour, checking my phone as if somehow the pregnancy would disappear if I wasn't paying attention. At 43, after 3 miscarriages, I didn't trust good news anymore. Good news had broken my heart before. Dr. Chen greeted me with the same calm smile she'd worn through every appointment over the past 2 years. "How are you holding up?" "I honestly don't know." She nodded like she'd heard that answer 100 times. "That's probably the healthiest response anyone could give." She reviewed my blood work again, then turned the monitor toward me. "Rebecca, I need you to understand something very clearly." I leaned forward. "Your previous diagnosis was diminished ovarian reserve." "I know. That is not the same as infertility." "I know." She looked at me for another second. "No, I don't think you do." She folded her hands. "It means pregnancy may be more difficult. It does not mean impossible. Somewhere along the way, someone turned less likely into never." I didn't answer, because I knew exactly who had done that. "We're going to consider this a high-risk pregnancy because of your age and your history," she continued. "You'll come in more often than most mothers, and I want you to reduce stress as much as possible." I laughed softly, I got divorced 4 days ago. She sighed. I wish I'd known. So do I. She hesitated before asking one more question. Did your husband ever complete his fertility evaluation? I looked down. Ex-husband. I'm sorry. He never took the tests. For the first time since I'd known Dr. Chen, I saw genuine disbelief on her face. He never... She stopped herself. Then she spoke much more carefully. Rebecca, whenever couples struggle to conceive, we evaluate both partners. That has always been the recommendation. I know. I just wanted to make sure someone had told you. They did. What happened? I smiled without humor. Pride happened. She didn't argue. Instead, she handed me a folder explaining prenatal nutrition, warning signs, and appointment dates. Before I left, she touched my arm gently. Your body has surprised all of us. I hope it keeps surprising us. So do I. Back at my apartment, I sat at the tiny kitchen table with my laptop open. I started writing an email. Ethan, I found out something yesterday that affects both of us. I stared at those 2 sentences for almost 20 minutes. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't Ethan. It was his attorney. The message was brief. Please direct any communication regarding the pending divorce through counsel. I closed my eyes. 10 minutes later, another notification appeared. This time, it was Margaret. Please don't drag this out. Ethan deserves the chance to build a real family. I read the message 3 times. Then I took screenshots and forwarded them to Naomi Price. She called me less than 15 minutes later. Don't respond. I wasn't planning to. Good. I hesitated. Naomi? Yes? I'm pregnant. Silence. Then a slow breath. Does Ethan know? No. When did you find out? Yesterday. She thought for several seconds. Rebecca, eventually he'll need to know. I know. You can't erase his legal responsibilities. I'm not trying to. Then why haven't you told him? I looked out my apartment window. Someone across the parking lot was helping an elderly woman load groceries into her trunk. I don't think I can survive another conversation where he looks at me like I'm broken. Naomi's voice softened. I understand. I need to know this baby is okay first. That's reasonable. She paused. Let's get through the first trimester, then we'll handle everything properly. For the first time all week, someone had given me permission not to decide everything immediately. I deleted the unfinished email. Life became strangely practical after that. Morning sickness didn't care that my marriage had ended. Bills didn't care either. My apartment was on the 2nd floor, and climbing those stairs with grocery bags suddenly felt like hiking a mountain. I started buying smaller cartons of milk because they weighed less. Instead of making 1 trip from the car, I made 3. I shopped at Target after work because their maternity section had clearance racks. I clipped digital coupons. I canceled streaming services. I learned which pharmacy offered the cheapest prenatal vitamins. Some evenings I was so tired I fell asleep on the couch before dinner. Other nights I sat awake wondering whether buying a crib before 12 weeks would somehow tempt fate. Grief makes ordinary decisions feel dangerous. Walter noticed I was eating crackers during one therapy session. Those for me? You don't even like crackers. I don't know. Retirement changes a man. I smiled. They're for my stomach. You sick? A little. He studied me for a long moment. You know something. What? When people get older, everybody thinks pain always comes from arthritis. He tapped his chest. Most of it starts somewhere in here. I adjusted the resistance band around his ankle. You always this philosophical? My late wife said I only got smart after 70. He pushed through another exercise. You ever notice people keep trying to recover the life they lost? I suppose. I did it for years after Helen died. He rested his hands on the parallel bars. Finally figured out something. What? I wasn't getting the old life back. He looked straight at me. So I stopped chasing it. That sentence stayed with me the whole drive home. At 12 weeks, Dr. Chen smiled before she said anything. Ready? I nodded. She switched on the Doppler. For a second, there was static. Then, fast. Steady. Strong. I'd heard heartbeats before, but never one that lasted. I cried so hard I couldn't apologize. Dr. Chen simply handed me tissues. I think this little one intends to stay. That afternoon, Naomi drafted a formal notice. Simple. Professional. No emotion. No accusations. It informed Ethan that I was pregnant, that conception occurred before our separation, and that future communication regarding the pregnancy should proceed through counsel while my physician managed a high-risk pregnancy. We sent it. Less than an hour later, my phone started ringing. Ethan? Again. 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 I let every call go to voicemail. The fifth message was only 18 seconds long. Rebecca, please call me. I didn't. Not because I hated him. Because I wasn't ready to hear his voice change depending on whether he believed me. 2 weeks later, Naomi arranged a meeting in her office. Ethan looked thinner. The confidence I'd always associated with him had disappeared. He sat down slowly. I took the tests. I said nothing. I should have done it years ago. Still nothing. He rubbed both hands together. I had 2 analyses. His voice cracked. They weren't good. I looked at him for the first time. What does not good mean? He swallowed. The specialist said, severe male factor infertility. The room became completely still. I asked if natural conception was impossible. And? He said unlikely. He laughed once. A doctor spends 20 years telling patients statistics don't define individuals. His eyes filled. Then he becomes the statistic. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Ethan whispered, if the dates are what you say. They are. Then, I interrupted him. You had 12 years to ask questions before you decided I was the problem. He nodded slowly. I know. No. I leaned forward. You know now. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. It was the first sincere apology I'd heard from him. It also came far too late. As he stood to leave, he hesitated. My mother told me she'd spoken to someone at your clinic. I frowned. Who? I don't know. She said they confirmed. He couldn't finish. I stared at the floor. No one at that clinic would ever discuss my records with Margaret. Not Dr. Chen. Not a nurse. Not anyone. A cold realization settled over me. Margaret hadn't misunderstood my diagnosis. She hadn't repeated bad information. She had invented certainty where none had ever existed. And Ethan, he had believed her without demanding proof. That hurt even more than the divorce. By the time I reached 38 weeks, I had almost convinced myself the hardest part was behind me. The baby's nursery fit into one corner of my first-floor apartment. Walter's daughter had helped me move after she discovered I was still climbing 2 flights of stairs carrying laundry. She insisted I was being stubborn. She wasn't wrong. The room wasn't fancy. A white crib I found through a neighborhood Facebook group. A rocking chair with one arm slightly loose. Tiny blue blankets folded neatly in a basket. Every item represented someone's kindness rather than my own spending. For the first time in months, I let myself believe I might actually bring this baby home. Dr. Chen remained cautiously optimistic. At your next appointment, she told me, we'll talk about scheduling an induction if labor hasn't started on its own. Is everything looking okay? So far, yes. Those 3 words became my favorite sentence in the English language. So far, yes. Not perfect. Not guaranteed. Just enough hope to keep walking forward. 3 days later, on a warm September evening, I finished my last patient a little after 5. Walter had finally walked the length of the therapy gym using only a cane. When he reached the end, he raised both hands like he'd won the Kentucky Derby. I'll take applause now. I laughed. You've earned it. He looked at my stomach. You're next. I hope not tonight. Well, babies have terrible timing. He wasn't wrong. I stopped at a grocery store on Nicholasville Road to buy milk, bananas, and oatmeal. I had just loaded the bags into my trunk when a sharp pain wrapped around my lower back. I froze. Another came 5 minutes later while I was driving. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and started timing them. 7 minutes apart. I called Dr. Chen's office. The answering service connected me to the on-call physician. How far apart? About 7 minutes. First baby? Yes. Head to the hospital now. My doctor practices at St. Joseph. What's closest? I swallowed. Bluegrass Regional. Go there. I knew exactly who was working there that night. The drive felt longer than it actually was. Every traffic light stayed red. Every bump in the road made me grip the steering wheel harder. When I reached Bluegrass Regional Medical Center, another contraction bent me forward before I even opened the car door. A volunteer hurried over with a wheelchair. I can walk. He smiled politely. Humor me. Inside labor and delivery, a familiar voice called my name. Rebecca? I looked up. Angela Brooks. Her gray hair was tucked beneath a surgical cap, just as neatly as it had always been. She had attended one of the hospital fundraising breakfasts years earlier when Ethan and I were still married. Recognition crossed her face. Oh, honey. She immediately knelt beside my wheelchair. How close together? 5, maybe 6 minutes. She helped me onto the triage bed while another nurse attached monitors across my stomach. The baby's heartbeat filled the room. Strong. Fast. Relief washed through me. Angela checked the computer. Then her expression changed. What? She hesitated. Dr. Lawson is the attending tonight. Every muscle in my body tightened. No. Rebecca. No. The word came out louder than I intended. I don't want him anywhere near me. Angela nodded immediately. I understand. She didn't argue. She simply reached for the phone. I'm calling Dr. Priya Patel. She spoke quietly into the receiver. When she hung up, she looked genuinely disappointed. Dr. Patel's in an emergency cesarean. When will she be here? As soon as she can. I closed my eyes. I'll wait. Another contraction answered for me. This one stole my breath completely. Angela watched the monitor. Then she looked back at me. I don't think this baby's interested in waiting. Things changed quickly after that. The contractions came closer together. A resident checked my progress. His eyebrows lifted. She's moving fast. Angela quietly stepped into the hallway. I heard pieces of conversation. Fetal heart rate. Need an attending. Dr. Lawson's closest. I knew what was happening before anyone said it aloud. The door opened. Ethan walked in wearing dark blue scrubs. He was reading something on a tablet until he looked up. Then he stopped. The color drained from his face. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I managed, "Get someone else." His eyes immediately moved toward the fetal monitor. He looked at the numbers. Then back at me. Dr. Patel's still in surgery. I don't care. I know. His voice stayed surprisingly calm. But your baby's heart rate just dipped during that contraction. Angela stood beside me. She requested another physician. I heard. He nodded. And she'll have one the second Dr. Patel gets here. He met my eyes. Until then, let me do my job. I hated that he was right. More than that, I hated needing him. The next 20 minutes blurred together. Monitors. Breathing. Blood pressure. Someone adjusting IV tubing. Someone explaining every step before touching me. Angela never left my side. Whenever Ethan needed to examine me, she asked permission first. It mattered. More than I expected. Because for the first time in months, someone remembered I still had choices. Even in labor. Another contraction hit. I squeezed the bed rail. Rebecca, Ethan said quietly. Look at me. I don't want to. I know. His voice stayed steady. But I need you to breathe with me. For one strange moment, we fell into an old rhythm. The same rhythm we'd practiced years earlier during childbirth classes that never ended with a baby. In. Out. Slow. Again. The memory hurt almost as much as the contractions. Suddenly another doctor entered. Dr. Priya Patel. I've got her. Relief flooded through me. Ethan immediately stepped back. But Dr. Patel checked my progress and shook her head. She's complete. The baby wasn't waiting for anyone. Stay, she told Ethan. I'll need another experienced set of hands. He nodded once. No discussion. No hesitation. Just work. The room became strangely quiet. Not silent. Focused. Dr. Patel coached. Angela encouraged. Someone adjusted lights. Someone counted. I pushed until every muscle in my body shook. Then one final effort. A cry. Sharp. Strong. Beautiful. Everything else disappeared. Angela smiled through tears. You have a son. She placed him against my chest. Warm. Heavy. Perfect. His tiny fingers wrapped around one of mine. I cried so hard I couldn't see him clearly. Across the bed, Ethan stared without moving. His eyes settled on the baby's face. The tiny cleft in his chin. The familiar shape of his ears. Recognition flickered across his expression. Not certainty. Recognition. He stepped closer before stopping himself. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Rebecca, I looked up. Is he? He couldn't finish. Then finally, is he mine? I kissed the top of my son's head. When I answered, my voice was calm. Count backward, Ethan. His shoulders dropped. He closed his eyes. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked less like a doctor than a man realizing he had destroyed something he could never fully repair. A few seconds later, I added quietly, You'll have your answer through a DNA test. He nodded. I understand. Dr. Patel gently touched his shoulder. We're finished here. Angela stepped between us. She needs recovery time. Ethan looked at me one last time. I really am sorry. I didn't answer. Some apologies belong to the past. This one had arrived months too late. An hour later, I lay in recovery, holding my son while nurses checked our vital signs. He slept with one tiny fist against his cheek. Outside the glass doors, I noticed someone standing alone in the hallway. Ethan. He wasn't trying to come inside. He simply watched from a respectful distance before quietly walking away. The following morning, another voice echoed down the hallway. Loud. Demanding. I have every right to see my grandson. Margaret. She carried blue balloons and a stuffed teddy bear as though buying gifts could erase everything she'd done. Security stopped her before she reached my room. She protested loudly enough for half the hallway to hear. I am the baby's grandmother. Naomi, who had arrived only minutes earlier, looked toward me. What would you like me to do? I looked down at my sleeping son, then back toward the hallway. Until the DNA test is finished. I paused. She doesn't come through that door. The DNA results arrived 12 days later. Naomi called while I was folding impossibly small baby clothes in my living room. They're in. I stopped folding. Even though I already knew what they would say, my heart pounded so hard I had to sit down. Well, probability of paternity is greater than 99.99%. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I didn't think about Ethan. I didn't think about Margaret. I didn't even think about the divorce. I looked down at my son, sleeping peacefully in his bassinet. Thank you, I whispered, though I wasn't sure whether I was thanking Naomi, God, or simple truth. Naomi waited a moment before continuing. Ethan wants to meet him. I expected that. He also asked if you'd consider letting him visit before mediation. I walked to the window. Outside, a young father was teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle in the apartment parking lot. Every few feet, she'd wobble, look back, and he'd remind her he was still there. I'll allow one visit, I finally said. Under what conditions? You're present. A nurse is present if we're still at the clinic, no Margaret. I'll make sure it's in writing. Ethan arrived exactly on time. That surprised me. The old Ethan often believed his schedule mattered more than everyone else's. The man standing outside the consultation room looked different. He'd lost weight. The confident stride I'd watched for years in hospital hallways had softened into something more careful, almost hesitant. He stopped several feet away. "Hi." I nodded once. He looked toward the baby. "May I?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I watched him. People can rehearse apologies. It's much harder to rehearse silence. Finally, I nodded. Angela happened to be working that afternoon and quietly brought over a chair before stepping back. Ethan sat down carefully and took his son into his arms, as though he were holding something both priceless and fragile. Our little boy yawned. Ethan laughed softly. "I've delivered thousands of babies." His voice broke. "This is the first time I've ever been afraid to hold one." I believed him. He looked down at the tiny face resting against his arm. "I missed the first 8 months." "Yes." "I can't change that." "No." He swallowed hard. "I can spend the rest of my life making sure I don't miss anything else." That was the first promise he made that I wanted to believe. Not because it repaired the past. Because it was finally focused on our son instead of himself. When he stood to leave, he handed the baby back without argument. Then he looked directly at me. "I was wrong." I nodded. "Yes." He waited, perhaps expecting me to say something more. I didn't. Some truths don't need decoration. Margaret reacted exactly as Naomi predicted. She called relatives. She called church friends. She even called one of Ethan's cousins in Louisville. According to the stories she spread, I had hidden the pregnancy to punish Ethan. I wanted money. I wanted attention. I wanted revenge. Interestingly, she never mentioned the divorce papers, or the word she'd used in my kitchen. Walter shook his head after hearing part of the story during one of our therapy sessions. "Funny thing about gossip." "What?" "It usually leaves out the part that makes the storyteller look guilty." He was getting stronger every week. By then, he'd traded his walker for a cane. Watching him relearn ordinary movements reminded me that healing rarely happens all at once. It's mostly small victories nobody else notices. A week later, Ethan called. Not to argue. Not to ask for another chance. To warn me. "My mother plans to come by your apartment." My stomach tightened. I never gave her my address. "She found it." "How?" "I don't know." "You do." He looked embarrassed. "She hired someone." I stared at him. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." Naomi immediately contacted Margaret's attorney. The visit never happened. But the incident changed something inside Ethan. For the first time, he stopped defending his mother's behavior with phrases like, "She means well," or, "You know how she is." Instead, he drove to Margaret's townhouse and demanded one simple answer. "Who told you Rebecca couldn't have children?" Margaret answered without looking up from her crossword puzzle. "A nurse." "What nurse?" "She worked with Dr. Chen." "What was her name?" Margaret paused. "I don't remember." Ethan waited. A full minute passed. Finally, Margaret sighed dramatically. "You're missing the point." "No." His voice remained calm. "I think I'm finally finding it." She set the newspaper aside. "I read about diminished ovarian reserve." "And?" "You'd already lost 3 babies." "And?" "She was 43. "And?" Margaret stood. I knew what it meant. "No." Ethan's answer came immediately. "You decided what it meant." She crossed her arms. "I was trying to save you." "From what?" "A lonely future." He laughed once. There wasn't any humor in it. "You were afraid of growing old alone." Her eyes widened. "That isn't fair." "You're right." He nodded slowly. "It isn't." He took a long breath before saying the sentence that finally ended years of excuses. "You protected your fears by destroying my marriage." Margaret stared at him. "You're choosing her over your own mother?" "No." He shook his head. "I'm choosing the truth over the lie I let myself believe." For the first time in Ethan's adult life, he walked out before Margaret finished speaking. Several months later, my rehabilitation clinic received an award for expanding fall prevention programs for older adults throughout Fayette County. Our director insisted I attend the hospital charity gala, where the award would be presented. I don't really want to go. You earned this. So did the rest of the team. And you're accepting it. I almost declined anyway. Then Walter solved the problem. You spend all day telling people not to hide from difficult things. He smiled. Maybe take your own advice. The ballroom at Bluegrass Regional looked exactly the way hospital fundraisers always do. Round tables. White linens. Too many speeches. Chicken that somehow tasted exactly like chicken served at every fundraiser in America. I accepted the award with my coworkers, smiled for photographs, and quietly hoped to leave before anyone noticed me. No such luck. Margaret noticed. She was standing with several longtime donors and 2 physicians' spouses when she looked directly at me. Her smile never reached her eyes. Well, she said loudly, some people certainly know how to land on their feet. Nobody answered. She continued. My poor son wasted 12 years in a marriage that was never going to give him children. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I picked up my purse. Walking away sounded healthier than arguing. Then Margaret added one more sentence. Some women will do anything to keep a successful man. Before I could respond, another voice cut through the room. That's enough, Mom. Ethan. He stepped between us. Margaret lowered her voice. Not here. He looked around the ballroom. You chose here. Silence spread across the nearby tables. Margaret forced a laugh. You're embarrassing yourself. No. He faced the small crowd. I embarrassed myself the day I believed gossip instead of my wife. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Ethan continued. Rebecca was never diagnosed as infertile. He looked directly at his mother. I refused fertility testing for years. His voice stayed steady. When I finally took the tests, the fertility problem was mine. Margaret reached for his arm. Stop talking. He gently stepped away. My mother convinced herself she knew more than Rebecca's doctors. He paused. And I let my pride make me believe her? No confidential records. No dramatic documents. Just the truth. Margaret's face turned pale. She looked at me with something between anger and humiliation. You're enjoying this. I met her eyes calmly. No, Margaret. I slipped my purse over my shoulder. You managed this without my help. She had no answer. For the first time since I'd met her, she stood completely alone. Outside the ballroom, Ethan caught up with me. Rebecca. I stopped. Does telling everyone the truth change anything? I looked toward the parking lot where the evening sun reflected off rows of cars. It changes who you are. I opened my car door. But it doesn't change what happened to us. He nodded. This time he didn't ask for more. He simply let me leave. People often imagine that once the truth comes out, everything falls neatly into place. Real life doesn't work that way. The DNA test answered one question. It didn't erase 12 years of hurt. It didn't teach Ethan how to become a father overnight. And it certainly didn't make me trust him again. If anything, it marked the beginning of a completely different journey. One that had nothing to do with saving a marriage. Everything to do with raising a little boy who deserved better than the mistakes his parents had made. Our mediation took place in early spring. Not in a dramatic courtroom. Not with shouting. Not with surprise witnesses. Just 2 attorneys, a retired mediator, Ethan and me seated around a polished conference table. Naomi had warned me beforehand. The goal isn't to win. It's to create a parenting plan your son can live with. That sentence changed how I approached the day. Instead of thinking about what Ethan deserved, I asked myself what our son deserved. By the end of 6 hours, we reached an agreement. I would have primary physical custody during our son's first year. Ethan would gradually receive more parenting time as the baby grew. He would cover child support, medical insurance, and half of all uncovered healthcare expenses. Every exchange would happen at a neutral location until both sides felt comfortable. Communication would go through a co-parenting app. No unexpected visits. No emotional phone calls. Everything documented. Then Naomi raised one final issue. Margaret, The room became very quiet. I folded my hands together. I don't object to my son knowing his grandmother someday. Ethan looked surprised. But, I continued, she will never be alone with him. He didn't argue. I understand. If she's present, you are present. He nodded again. And if she insults me in front of him even once? I'll end the visit myself. I studied his face. For the first time in over a year, I believed he meant exactly what he said. Life settled into something that almost resembled normal. Almost. Our son grew faster than either of us expected. His first laugh happened while Walter was making exaggerated faces during one of my lunch breaks. I knew the kid had good taste, Walter announced proudly. His first tooth arrived after 3 sleepless nights that left both Ethan and me looking permanently exhausted. One Saturday morning, Ethan showed up carrying an expensive bottle warmer. I read it was highly recommended. Our son stared at it, then refused to drink from the warmed bottle. Walter happened to stop by that afternoon with homemade vegetable soup. He picked up the baby, hummed an old Johnny Cash tune, and somehow convinced him to finish the bottle in less than 5 minutes. Ethan looked completely defeated. I've delivered thousands of babies. Walter grinned. But you've never negotiated with one. For the first time in months, all 3 of us laughed together. Not because everything had been fixed, because ordinary moments had started replacing painful ones. Margaret requested a meeting several weeks later. Naomi advised against seeing her alone. So we met at my attorney's office. Margaret walked in using a cane. I hadn't realized how much older she'd become. Her shoulders seemed smaller, her confidence quieter. She looked toward the baby sleeping in his stroller, then back at me. I only wanted what was best for Ethan. I said nothing. She waited. When I still didn't respond, she sighed. I suppose that's not really an apology. No. She nodded slowly. It isn't. She looked down at her hands. When my husband died, I became terrified. Her voice shook. I was afraid everyone would move on without me. I listened. Not because fear excused what she'd done, because understanding someone isn't the same as agreeing with them. I convinced myself that if Ethan had children, I'd always have a place. She swallowed. So I looked at your miscarriages and your age, and that doctor's phrase I barely understood. Diminished ovarian reserve, I said quietly. She nodded. I turned possibility into certainty. Tears filled her eyes. I lied. Silence. I judged your worth by something no woman should ever be judged by. Another long pause. I'm sorry, Rebecca. This time there were no excuses attached. No mention of good intentions. No blame shifted elsewhere. Just responsibility. I took a slow breath. I accept that you're sorry. She looked hopeful. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust. Her shoulders dropped. I know. I won't keep my son from knowing you. Fresh tears rolled down her face. But every boundary stays. I understand. You don't criticize me in front of him. I won't. You don't question my parenting. I won't. And you never try to make him choose between us. She nodded. I promise. It wasn't redemption. It was accountability. Sometimes that's enough. Summer arrived. Walter graduated from physical therapy. Our entire clinic applauded as he walked across the gym using only his cane. When I hugged him goodbye, he whispered, "You know what recovery really is?" What? Learning that the life you have left is still worth living. I carried those words home with me. A few weeks later, Ethan asked if we could talk after dropping off our son. We sat on a park bench overlooking Jacobson Park Lake while little ducks paddled across the water. He looked nervous. More nervous than I'd ever seen him before surgery or public speaking. I've been seeing a therapist. I smiled slightly. I'm glad. I've been trying to understand why I let my mother think for me. I didn't interrupt. I don't think I'll ever fully understand it. He looked down. But I'm trying. I know. I also know this may not change anything. It doesn't. He nodded sadly. I figured. Then he surprised me. I still wanted to ask. He took a breath. Would you ever consider counseling together? I looked out across the lake. Children chased geese. A grandfather helped his grandson bait a fishing hook. Life continued around us without caring about our history. Finally, I answered. You've become a better father. Thank you. You've become more honest. I hope so. You've learned to stand up to your mother. He smiled faintly. I'm still working on that. I returned the smile. But none of those things make us husband and wife again. He closed his eyes briefly. I understand, I continued gently. When you believed I couldn't have children, you stopped believing in us. He looked away. When you learned I could, he whispered, I wanted another chance. I know. I reached for my purse. Our son deserves a father. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be one. I believe you. I stood. But I deserve a partner who chooses me regardless of what my body can or can't do. He nodded. There was sadness in his eyes. But no argument. No bargaining. No promises. Just acceptance. And somehow that was the most loving thing he'd done since the day we married. On a warm afternoon the following spring, our little boy took his first real steps. He stood between Ethan and me in the grass at Jacobson Park. One step, then another. Then he fell onto his diaper and burst into laughter. Ethan instinctively reached forward. So did I. Our son grabbed both our hands at the same time. For one brief moment we stood there together. Not as husband and wife. Not even as friends. Simply as two imperfect people who loved the same child. Watching him laugh under a bright Kentucky sky, I realized something. I used to think revenge meant seeing the people who hurt me suffer. Instead, it turned out to be something much quieter. Signing my own lease. Attending doctor's appointments alone when I had to. Learning that accepting help wasn't weakness. Building a peaceful life that no longer depended on someone else's approval. Ethan lost a marriage because he believed fear instead of truth. Margaret lost the control she thought she needed to feel safe. As for me, I found something I never expected. Not victory. Freedom. If you've ever had someone decide your value before they truly knew your heart, I hope you remember this. Another person's fear doesn't have to become your identity. Thank you for spending this time with me. I wish you peace, strong boundaries, and the courage to believe your own worth.